Okay, today on my bench what I have in here is an Atari 2600. Now this is a console which is really special for me. It was the first console I ever had. I've owned a bunch of these and I actually still own a bunch of these, but back in the UK, and they're PAL models. So there's another project that I wanted to work on that required an Atari 2600, which is a multi-cart, which I'm going to be doing some videos about later. But I picked this one up off Craigslist for 60 bucks. And there's a few problems with it, there's a few faults, but it's a nice console. It came in this really amazing 90s inline skate box, which just makes it all the better. But let's open this up and see what's inside. So like I say, I paid 60 bucks Canadian for this, which I think is about right for a machine that's a little bit faulty. We can talk about all this there. So first up, if you look inside the box, we've got four cartridges here, and 2 controllers, some leads, including the original power supply, the original Atari power supply, and this Coleco switch box as well, RF switch box. So it came with Pac-Man, which is an awful version of Pac-Man, but I have really happy memories of this cartridge. It's one of the games I had back in the day. It also came with Combat, which was a pack-in, not so good. Well, I mean, it's fine. It's a fine game. It's not a bad game, but it's very bland. This comes with every Atari ever. We also had Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I've actually never played. This is actually a later game. By looking at the silver label here, that you can tell that's a later version of the game. It actually says 82. This console came out in 77, so it was a good 5 years after the launch of the Atari that Raiders of the Lost Ark came out. You can see the rainbow here, and the fact that this is called the Atari 2600 rather than the video computer system. And finally, we've got football, which I need to look up. This looks like it's in a Mattel cart style, but it actually says copyright II 1982 Korea. So I need to work out what this cartridge is, and I'll update that at the end of this video, or put it in the description. So the Atari itself is actually one of the later Atari wood grain models. So as you can see, it actually has this wood grain bezel across the front, which was the classic look. But this actually is the later version of this wood grain type. It actually is a 4-switch, because it's known as a 4-switch rather than a 6-switch, because it has 4 switches here, and then 2 of the switches that were normally on the front of the panel here were actually moved to the back, which is difficulty selectors. These were actually used rarely in games. Combat certainly uses it, and some other Atari games, but it wasn't something that you saw commonly. So they obviously moved these off from here, from the front to the back, and I guess they made use of cheaper style kind of dip switches here. There's also a channel selector here, and then at the back there is an RF switch. Now, RF cable, I should say. Now this actually came with 2 CX40 controllers as well, which are the original Atari joysticks. These I know actually don't work from the guy that said so. Actually, part of the mod that we're going to do later on, probably not in this video. It looks like someone's trying to be in this by the looks of the fact this case is not put back together properly. So we're actually going to put some tack switches in here, and maybe we're going to design a custom board for this as well and send it off and get it fabricated at Osh Park. So what else we have in here? We have the power connector, and we have this Coleco switch box as well. So the first thing that we're going to do, and we're going to do this today, is we're actually going to clean this up, and we're going to kind of restore it back to its original glory. It's not in bad condition. There's a little dent here. Some of this orange around the bezel here has come off, and that's to be expected on these machines, that this kind of like over time starts to fade away. And looking on the underside, this label here is a little bit peeled. But we'll tidy this up, we'll get it looking pristine, and then we'll talk about some of the mods that we're going to do, including the video mod. I might do a pause button mod. I'm not huge on that. It's not something that's massive utility, but it's a cool mod nonetheless. The fact that I'm probably doubting it means I won't do it, but certainly we'll do the joysticks, and we'll get this back up and running and back to its original glory. So, like I say, let's get it cleaned up, and I can talk about some of the techniques I'm going to use for cleaning this and getting it looking good. As you can see close up here, like this Atari is dusty, to say the least. So what I would normally do with electronics is I would just clean them up with, this is like an electronics cleaner spray that I've taken the contents out of this, poured it away, and I've actually mixed in some isopropyl alcohol, some water and some dish soap, and created like a little cleaning fluid. And what I would do with this is just sort of spray it on and then wipe it away with a bit of old rag, which will give you a reasonable clean here. But what we're going to do with this, as you can see, that there's a great deal of improvement from this side to this side just from using that. I think actually what we're going to need to do here is a lot of crust. This stuff's kind of difficult to get into. I think we need to go a bit more heavy duty. So we're actually going to wash this in a sink with some soapy water, hot soapy water, like we would a dish. So the first thing to do is actually to take it apart. So we'll flip it over and we'll do that. So off camera here, I've just cleaned up this board using an air duster and some isopropyl alcohol, using a little kind of squeegee that I made out of funky foam just to clean in the cartridge port here and actually clean the cartridge port externals as well. The board's actually looking quite nice. It was dusty, but it was pretty clean. This doesn't have to be spanking. I mean, it works, it functions, it's all good. So the next step for us actually is going to be just to grab the externals and which have been washed, and look at starting to restore some of that and give it some of its natural shine back. So the Atari's externals now have been washed and cleaned. I actually just used soapy water, like I said. It's still a little bit damp here, but it's mostly dry. So what we're going to do is, this is not too bad, but it looks a little dull. We're actually going to use a little bit of WD-40 here on a rag and just smear that across the top using, like I say, a little bit of cloth here. And what that's going to do is it's going to restore some of the shine. So let's give this a go. Something I've never tried before, but I've seen another YouTuber do. So we'll get on with it and see what it looks like. Just going to use a tiny little bit applied to this cloth here. So there's just a small amount on there. I'm just going to drag this across and see what kind of finish that gives us. So I don't know how well that's going to come out on camera. You can actually see the difference here. We've got this WD-40 applied across here, and then this dull original finish. So let's try this on the rest of the case, and we'll see how it comes out. So that's the WD-40 applied to the top shell. I'm going to do this on the bottom as well, but I'll do it off camera. And it actually looks great. This is giving it a real shine. I don't know how much you can see this. The WD-40 did seem to attack this yellow across here. So this is taking a little bit more of this yellow off. So what I might do is make a decision here of later down the line to either just kind of take all this off and leave it without yellow, or go back and try to repaint this, masking it off with some builder's paint and just using some acrylic to try and match the color there. And I think we could get that looking pretty good. But generally, this console looks great now with this WD-40 in the clean. There's a little bit of trapped water here, which will just dry out over time. But this is looking really, really solid and like a really nice start. So the next step is to do the same with the bottom, which I'll do off camera, and then reassemble it all, and then we can have a look. So this is the bottom of the console actually. Something I'm going to do real quick here is this label's kind of loose. I'm actually going to try and reattach this just to get it a little bit tidier. I'm going to use some CA glue. I'm sure this is not the best type of glue to be using in this instance, so we'll try it and we'll see what happens. But if you've got better suggestions, maybe a contact cement or something like that, please write in the comments so we can, I'd love to know what you recommend for gluing down labels. Just going to hold it for a second. That should be enough. I can feel that my finger is already attaching to it. Looks like it's holding pretty well there. She's never going to look perfect. Just a little tiny bit under there as well. That might whiten up actually around where it makes contact with the plastic, as CA glue tends to. That's certainly making it look a little bit better than it did before, which is nice. So the next thing I'm going to do here is just reassemble this, and we'll put it on and play some games. So that's the console reassembled, and I think you probably agree that it looks a lot better. This
Still a little bit of damp here. I just did a little bit of a clean up and finish off with some cotton buds along these vents here. It looks really good. You also notice probably when I reassembled it there that I didn't put the RF cable back in there. That was intentional. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make a video mod on this, which is going to be an S video or a composite video output, and rather than drilling some holes in the back and putting in some sockets, I'm actually just going to use that original hole there and have the leads come out like the original RF lead, so it keeps the console as much as possible feeling and looking original. So really happy with how this turned out. It looks really good. The light WD-40 finish on it actually gives it a really nice shine and a gleam rather than a kind of dull. I still want to replace this yellow along here, so I'm actually going to probably mask this off and paint it in another video. Probably when we do the video mod, and then that's going to be the second part of the series. In the third part of the series, we're going to look at the joysticks, and we're going to replace those original crank dome switches, which I know don't work, with some new tack switches, and we're possibly going to design a new board and get that sent off to fabrication at Osh Park. So thanks for watching. Come back for the next 2 parts of the video. We'll have a really nice Atari 2600 console which can be plugged into a modern TV and works and runs and looks great. Thanks.